Chapter 4 discusses global management. We are going to discuss the impact of globalization as managers and in our organizations. We will also describe the characteristics of a successful international manager and why and how companies expand internationally. We will also discuss some of the cultural differences you may encounter if you become an international manager. Globalization is the trend of the world economy and it toward becoming a more interdependent system and is reflected in three developments: the rise of the global village and e-commerce, the trend of the world's becoming one big market, and the rise of both mega firms and the internet enabled many firms worldwide. We will discuss each of these in this lecture. But first, this table is from World Economics Forum from 2016 to 2017. It indicates that the U.S. is third in terms of global competitiveness. Does this surprise any students that we are not number one in the competition globally in terms of markets? Other fun facts from the test book asks and identifies, are we the richest? In terms of the gross domestic product, total value of all goods and services, the U.S. ranks number 9 behind Qatar, Luxembourg, Singapore, Kuwait, Norway, Hong Kong. Canada is number 20. How about the most free? Hong Kong, a special administrative region of the People's Republic of China, is number 1. The United States is number 12. According to the criteria of this economic freedom group, Hong Kong is considered free by this standard. Both Canada, number 6, and the United States are considered mostly free. The global village refers to the shrinking of time and space as air travel and the electronic media and what electronic media has done to make it easier for people of the globe to communicate with one another. 25 years ago, cell phones, pagers, fax, and voicemails links barely existed. My goodness, I remember a world without cell phones. I remember a world without internet when the first internet what the internet was, and sitting at the computer lab at Wayne State University and saying, what is this internet business? So that wasn't very long ago, and the world was so much different back then. By 2015, we have 7 billion mobile cell subscriptions. Today, of the 7.4 billion people in the world, 43% are internet users. So technology, the internet, is impacting us in many ways, and we as managers need to be prepared. The internet came, along with the internet came e-commerce, and the buying and selling of products and services through computer networks. U.S. retail e-commerce sales were estimated at $341.7 billion for 2015, up 14.7 over the previous year, and that's just increasing. Asian countries account for nearly half of the world's mobile online shopping, worth more than $230 billion. So as you read this chapter, think about how technology has changed the way we think about global commerce. Do you feel that companies could reach the world with their products and services? What impact will this have in coming years as you evaluate your job opportunities and your earning potential? This is an extraordinary time to come of age in business, and the globe is a limit, literally. So on page 119 in chapter 4, there is an example of e-commerce of Alibaba. Back in 2017, there was commerce at Kobo Arena. Alibaba, Jack Ma was here and got to hear him speak and tell us about how he started Alibaba, the impact, the growth that he saw, and just the market size that Alibaba has in China and the Asian countries. It is just staggering. It is much bigger than Amazon. So take a moment to read that example. It really is fascinating, and this Jack Ma is just this little guy who's just awesome, put together, great story behind his success. So when you read this, think about how Alibaba had, a few data centers in the U.S., but had none to engage, any exploratory talks with other companies before they began to join, with other networks of retailers to grow themselves to what it is today. So, as you read it again, do you agree that it makes sense for Alibaba to remain focused on its home market of China? Why or why not? And during the conference, Jack Ma said that people in China want certain fruits, that they buy cherries from Traverse City, they buy, cherries from, peaches from Atlanta, from Georgia. So it's a huge market. And what is the potential that we have here as producers and as business owners to, within this e-commerce and this emerging market in China? So our textbook defines a global economy as the increasing tendency of the economies of the world to interact with one another as one market instead of many national markets. So one question we ask is a global economy really good for everyone? Is it good for the United States? There are both positive and negative effects to a more global world. Though it is exciting to be interconnected, it can also lead to outsourcing labor to other countries, particularly in manufacturing. Some positives of this global economy is that the effects are the movement or the outsourcing of formerly well-paying jobs overseas as companies seek cheaper laborers, particularly manufacturing. So we are able as a company to outsource our labor to, markets in China or wherever where the labor is not that expensive. So another positive is the world will be far more interconnected, leading to better and more affordable products. Because if I'm able to make this product cheaper somewhere else, I can sell it cheaper here in my home market. There's better communication also among nations. It's another positive. Think of all the products that we can purchase from places around the world that we weren't able to 15 years ago. However, there are some negative effects as well. One that comes to mind is the loss of jobs across the U.S. If we are outsourcing these products, then it means that we are not employing people in our home country. And other effects of globalization is the day-to-day challenges that managers and companies are faced with. Data breaches, the loss of control over quality and standards, the risk that they take of, having their product produced somewhere else. There's huge risk in that in terms of political, legal, and all of that. The company culture, the communication, the cultural differences that exist are there. So, we will discuss, how to be culturally literate as a manager and dealing with these international markets, and how to be able to, understand these cultural differences when you do business and work with other employees who are, from a different culture. The global market is big. Because of cross-border business, there is a rise in both mega mergers and mini firms worldwide. With the ability to travel anywhere and connect with anyone via the internet, we are seeing a rise in mergers to create giant global firms, as well as small and more interdependent mini firms who have the ability to sell their products globally. You might have friends or family members who are selling products globally. I know I have some students who sell their products at Etsy and are doing very well. So that's an example of that. So as mega mergers and mega firms and mergers are on the rise, industries are becoming bigger and cross-global, especially automobiles, the automobile industry, telecommunications, and healthcare. Many firms are operating worldwide, and as the internet allows almost anyone to be global, there are with two important results. Small companies can still get started more easily because anyone can put up their product and start selling it on the internet. The Etsy, you put it up there, marketplace. Small companies can maneuver faster because they can change direction faster, giving them the advantage over companies. So if they see a change in a certain trend happening, they're able to adapt quickly and make that change faster rather than a large company. So for many of you, this might be your first business class, but for some, you might be thinking about going into business. On page 122, Managing Your Career, Getting the Edge in the Global Market, read this example and brush up on those skills, to help you increase your chances of landing an international job. So now, along with that, the chances of landing this international job, or also working with someone, in a culturally diverse environment, brushing up on that cultural awareness, learning a foreign language is very good as well. These are skills that you can take abroad with you. Be flexible in what you can learn and what you know. Find out whether your current company has positions overseas. Research those responsibilities and all of that. Look at entry requirements if you do have to go work abroad. Consider teaching or tutoring abroad. So think about all the key challenges that are there, but that you can overcome in different ways. That there are things that are there for you to overcome these challenges in tutorials, seminars, professional development, and all of that. So in looking at question number 1 here, Jane sells her art through her own website, her Etsy store. She receives questions from many different countries. Jane is engaged in what? So if you answered A, you are right. E-commerce. So e-commerce is the selling of products, and in this instance, Jane's products through computer networks, through Etsy, and in her own website. So that's e-commerce. So international management. So I have my master's, one of my master's is in international marketing. Although it is not international management, the concept and skills needed are very much the same. Why do you ask, why did I pursue such a degree? Because of globalization. It has been over 15 years since I have received my degree, and at that time I saw what was happening around us. Our world was becoming smaller and smaller, and business began to deal on a more international level. And it was a perfect opportunity to pursue such a degree. It was important for me to know how to deal with foreign customers and suppliers, and international management prepares you to do the same. In order to be a successful international manager, you aren't ethnocentric or polycentric or geocentric, and we will discuss this. Just like in much of the topics that were discussed when I was pursuing my degree in international marketing is the same for international management. Since globalization is around us, we might find ourselves working for various structured companies, and one might be a multinational corporation, which is a business firm that operates in several countries, like GM, Walmart, Ford, Apple, and so many others. And another type is a multinational organization, which is a nonprofit organization that operates in several countries. And this is your Red Cross and your World Health Organizations are examples of these multinational organizations. So as I mentioned earlier, why I got my international marketing degree, some reasons why you should learn about international management, even if you don't plan on moving out of the country or whatever, is that you may deal with foreign customers or partners. So you may deal with foreign employees or suppliers. You may work with a foreign company in the United States, or you may work for an American firm outside the United States or for a foreign one. And being here in Macomb County, we see this. We see, if we are working at, the corner Starbucks, we will encounter foreign customers. We will, if we work at, tier 1 supplier or tier 2 supplier, for the automotive industry, we will deal with foreign suppliers and foreign employees and all of that. So it is important for us to understand and learn about international management, and so that if we do become managers, that we know how to deal with this cultural difference. So being successful abroad requires you to take time to learn about the culture of the country where you are going to do business. So if you do get a job that you need to go overseas, you need to learn about the country. So according to a DDB worldwide survey, Americans are perceived as being arrogant, loud, and uninterested in the world. Now, do you think this is a fair characterization of all Americans? Of course not. However, we can all remember to do our part in combating these stereotypes by following some single tips to be successful. Be patient, be quiet, listen, don't use slang, don't talk about wealth. Be global in your in your focus. Study up on the local customs. What's going on. What is the local custom to of how to greet someone, the cuisine, or just whatever it may be. Learn about appropriate behavior, gestures, eye contact. How to greet someone, how to talk to someone at a dinner, how to act when you're abroad, when in this coast country. How to act with someone. Learn rituals of respect, shaking hands, how to dress, and become, skilled in their language. Learn the basics, how are you, just to get by, and all of that. So it's very important if you are going to deal outside of the U.S. and in a foreign country to learn the basics and become culturally literate in the basic things, so that you don't come across as what the world thinks of us as arrogant. So to be a successful international manager, we need to not to be ethnocentric or polycentric and geocentric, and what I mentioned at the start of this slide. So, what does that mean? So ethnocentric managers tend to believe that they can export managers and practices of their home countries to anywhere in the world, and they will be more capable and reliable. This viewpoint is less attributable to prejudice than it is to ignorance. So since such managers obviously know more about their home environment than the foreign environment. So is ethnocentrism bad for business? It seems so. A survey of 918 companies with home offices in the US, Japan, and Europe found that ethnocentric policies were linked to such problems as recruiting difficulties, high turnover rates, and lawsuits over personnel policies. So in sum, ethnocentric managers believe that their native country, culture, language, behavior is superior to everybody else, and that is not what we want to think. Related to parochialism, which is a narrow view in which people see things solely through their own perspective. On the other hand, polycentric managers can also run into pitfalls. In a large global company, cohesive management is important to success. Polycentric managers take the view that native managers in that foreign office best understand native personnel and practices, so the home office should leave them alone. So are either of these the right way to be, or what is the alternative? What is the better way? Geocentric managers tend to accept that other differences and similarities between home and foreign personnel and practices, that they should use whatever techniques are most effective. So then this geocentric is basically me from the United States working in Italy, for example, taking the best of concepts from both countries, figuring out what techniques and what practices work best to reach the goal. That is what the geocentric view is. So this blending of cultures and management techniques can lead to a very successful global existence. So let's take a look at question 2. Alvin accepts that differences and similarities exist between home and foreign personnel and practices, and that the company should use whatever techniques are most effective. Alvin can be described as, think about this for a minute. Pull out some key words or key phrases to lead you to the answer. And the correct answer, if you chose, is geocentric. So if you got C, you are correct. So geocentric managers, again, work toward the most effective solution. They accept that there will be differences and similarities between the home and the foreign personnel. So in this instance, we have our key word is effective in our question. So, but in order to be a successful international manager, you also need to understand the cultural differences that exist. Let's define what culture is. It is a shared set of beliefs, values, knowledge, and patterns of behavior common to a group of people. For example, the culture of tipping in restaurants varies from country to country. We tip here in the United States. In Europe, they don't tip. so that is, that's our culture that we do that. So culture defines who we are, and it is different across the world. And as we discussed earlier, it is best to understand the culture you are visiting or doing business with beforehand so you don't make any mistakes. Miscommunication and misunderstandings arise because people don't understand the expectations from the other side. Remember that what we do here may not be the way to do business in other cultures. So that is why it is important to understand the cultural differences and how business is conducted. Many countries are defined as low or high context culture. This means that a low context culture has shared meanings primarily derived from written and spoken words. Countries from these low context cultures are the US, Great Britain, Scandinavia, and Germany. In other words, context is taken from what is read or spoken. So they listen to what you say, what is being said, your actions, rather than what is written is more obliged in those low context countries. On the other side, we have high context cultures, which rely heavily on situational cues, meaning when communicating with others, what are they doing? What are their mannerisms, how their body language, and all of that. So countries, the high context cultures are China, Korea, Japan, Mexico, and many of the Arab countries. So in the U.S., our shared meanings are primarily relied on the written and spoken words, and that's why we are a low context culture. In contrast, high context cultures rely heavily on nonverbal cues as to another person's official position, their status, and family connection. So just knowing this, you can see how business conversations may differ if you're dealing with a low context culture versus a high context culture. So think about what someone from the U.S. conducting business with someone from Japan. What are the differences that each needs to pay attention to? And this is part of the preparation of being, understanding the cultural differences and doing business effectively. So in 1993, the GLOBE project was a massive and ongoing cultural investigation of 9 cultural dimensions involved in leadership and organizational process. GLOBE stands for Global Leadership and Organizational Behavior Effectiveness. Countries that rank highest and lowest on each they rank countries from highest to lowest, and there are 9 cultural dimensions that the GLOBE project identified. The first one is power distance, and it expresses the degree to which a society's members expect power to be unequally shared. Next, we have power uncertainty avoidance. It expresses the extent to which a society relies on social norms and procedures to alleviate the unpredictability of future events. What are the social norms and procedures that exist so that we are able to counteract these future events or problems that we might have. Institutional collectivism expresses the extent in which individuals are encouraged and rewarded for loyalty to the group as opposed to pursuing individual groups. In contrast to individualism, we have in-group collectivism, and this expresses the extent to which people should take pride in being members of their family, a close circle of friends, their work organization. Then we have gender egalitarianism, and this expresses the extent to which a society should minimize gender discrimination and role inequalities. And this is what's happening that we're seeing right now in our society. Then we have assertiveness. It represents the extent to which a society expects people to be confrontational and competitive. Future orientation, to which society encourages and rewards its members for performance improvement and excellence. And finally, humane orientation. It represents the degree in which individuals are encouraged to be altruistic, caring, kind, and fair. So page 143, table 4.8 ranks countries from highest to lowest on this GLOBE cultural dimension. So take a look, are you surprised at some of the results for some of the countries? So, in essence, this is what it's saying is that countries in these 9 dimensions expect something. They're expressed, their power distance, their uncertainty, their individualism is expressed in a certain way, and it ranks them, from highest to lowest in these 9 dimensions. Finally, here are some other cultural variations to be aware of. Language. More than 7,000 languages are spoken in the world, so we are a very big world, and we probably have dealt with people who don't speak the same language as we do, and we will probably deal with customers and businesses that don't speak English as their first language. So we need to be prepared and to understand as managers how to deal with this disconnect. Personal space, and we have to understand personal space. As Americans like to conduct business 3 to 4 feet of space compared to Asians, whereas from 3.6 to 4.2 feet. So that personal space that we have, again. So if our personal space is far, and someone whose personal space is like 1 or 2 feet, and yours is 3 to 4 feet, what do you do when you talk? Do you step away from that person? But what's that nonverbal message that you're sending them, that you're stepping away from them when they conduct business at 1 to 2 feet? So you got to understand those differences. Communication. Do you treat business as a task, which we do here in the United States, or as a relationship they like to do in China? If you deal with, persons from the Japanese culture, Chinese culture, they build a relationship first with you and gain that trust before they jump into business. Whereas with us, we jump right into business, and no relationship. It's like, let's get down to business. So there's that disconnect of those cultural differences that we have. Time orientation. Doing one thing at a time is monochromatic. Doing more than one thing at time is polychromatic. What is time? What do you do one thing at a time? Do you do many things? Do you show up late? Are you on time? So, what is your time orientation? Religion. How does religion influence work-related values? So, if you are, working with someone from a different religion, how is that impacting the work-related values of the company and your immediate workplace? We have law and political stability, so beware of the Foreign Corrupt Practice Act, which makes it illegal for employees of U.S. companies to make questionable or dubious contributions to political decision makers in foreign countries. Be aware of the instability in the country, and all of that, and what are the corruption and the labor abuses. So we can see why Can we see why doing business globally isn't quite as easy as it sounds, when we first started at the beginning of this lecture? So as managers, we need to understand that there are differences, and to be a good international manager and to deal on people on from different cultures, we need to be aware of these. We need to understand these cultural variations. We need to learn and adjust and know how to deal with this. And when we go abroad and do business, we need to understand how to be effective so that we don't negate a deal or something like that. So it's important that we understand that. And with us here in our Metro Detroit area, we understand that even more, and it just become more culturally literate and have a good view, can be geocentric rather than polycentric or ethnocentric. So it's just something to think about as we have this climate that we are in currently. Well, this concludes chapter 4.